You can't replicate that with a robot marking your work. Why would you care what a stupid robot thought?
Welcome to our podcast, How to Live an Extraordinary Life from Duke's Education.
Technology education is essential, but EdTech is a very different beast.
My name is Ricky Tavares, and alongside my superstar colleague, Libby, we have the unique privilege of meeting world-leading figures to understand how they have successfully navigated both life's ups and downs to go on and achieve extraordinary things.
We want our children to be digitally literate, of course. That can be taught in IT lessons.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by the actor and children's advocate, Sophie Winkleman. You'll know Sophie from roles in TV shows like Peep Show and Waking the Dead.
If children don't have those building blocks of doing all that slightly boring, effortful stuff, you don't get them back.
But in recent years, she's become a passionate campaigner around the harm that the excessive use of screens and technology can have on young people's mental health. Sophie, welcome to How to Live an Extraordinary Life.
I wanted to start by first of all just saying, as a parent to two young boys myself, a huge, genuine thank you for shining a light on such an important topic for young people today around smartphones and screens and the impact that's having on the next generation. I also have to say, I watched your art keynote speech earlier on this week, and wow, for someone who struggles to concentrate, I was gripped for 19 minutes, hanging literally off your every word. And I'm very pleased to say it's already changed my parenting approach. So thank you and welcome.
Bless you. Thank you very much.
I'd love to just start by, first of all, just digging into your own childhood, your analog childhood, as you've sort of famously referenced. Any anecdotes or points that you'd like to share with us that kind of have equipped you to getting to where you are today?
Well, first of all, I was terribly lucky in that I had two very loving, funny, kind parents. And I was lucky enough that exciting screens didn't exist then. And I just had to get bored and I had to draw. I drew a huge amount when I was little and I wrote my own stories and friends came over and we wrote plays. And if you get to the point when you're bored, I think that's when creativity kicks in. And what I'm sad about now is that children are far too passive because they're far too entertained. And when you're passive and you're constantly expecting to be given that dopamine hit by external content, that creativity doesn't kick in. And I see it with my own family, I see it with me and all my friends. We're just glued to these machines. So I just feel terribly grateful that I got bored and I read loads of books and I learned how to draw very cartoon style drawings, but I still do it for people's birthdays and stuff. And I wrote a lot and I think it helped me concentrate. Concentration is another, it's not only creativity, it's being able to focus. And you say you have a problem trying to focus on things. So do we all. But for very young brains, that is critically terrifying. And we need to be able to give them the space to really deep dive and concentrate on something. That's gone.
And I think there was a quote that grabbed my attention that you said, which is screens for young people, they're caffeinating them,
yes,
but also zombifying them at the same time. And you've got this sort of diametrically opposed forces coming at a point where we know the importance now of self-regulation, of being able to have moments of stillness. How do we combat that moving forward now?
I totally believe that they are agitating and kind of alienating. So when a child is doing their homework after school on a screen, they're sort of getting enervated. I can see it. I can see it in the children who's, I've been doing this for about 3 years now, and I'm just one of those annoying parents who go round to friends' houses and watch children and how I'm very odd about it now. It's a complete obsession. And anecdotally, so many parents have written to me saying, I just want my son to calm down after school. I want him to open a book, think about things, and just start getting ready for bedtime. And instead, he has to open up a screen, it winds him up. And also he's not fully engaged. So I think screen learning, most of it, not all of it, is kind of the worst of all worlds. I think it's enervating, and I think you're not learning in a deep, engaged, personal way.
It's interesting, isn't it, if we think back to 2020, which I think was a hinge year because of COVID. And there was this almost chaotic rush to online learning, to virtual learning, which was necessitated through the lockdown. And there was a real kind of general optimism about the disruption and innovation that EdTech would bring, and that was accelerated through COVID. And of course, what's interesting about your work is that the data in the last 5 years does not bear that out, that optimism about tech in education. And there's a lot of now evidence-based research into the impact on learning. And I think that what's happened, certainly last year and this year, and why we're so delighted that you're with us today, is that educators and parents are now hearing that research and that data. And we're also correlating that with our experiences as parents. So I've got 4 children of varying ages, and I too see what you say, but I also have to self-regulate my own life because I am their role model. And we were talking earlier, you mentioned you've changed your parenting practice. How important do you think that is for adults to take the lead in our own behaviour? Because it's tricky.
It's a very tricky one. I don't go fully down the route of parents have to be ideal role models and put their phones away the second they get home, because most of us work on our phones. And I think there's there's a line between children and grown-ups. We drink wine with our dinner and we sort of occasionally smoke. We do all sorts of naughty things that grown-ups can do. And I think if we are intentional with our children, saying, I have to write back to a very long email now, I'm so sorry, give me half an hour. I think we're allowed. I just think there's a distinction between grown-ups and children. Our brains have grown up in an analog world where we can concentrate and we're kind of safe. We can use these things as great tools for communication and for our work. Children, I think it's just a separate issue. I don't think grown-ups need to beat themselves up. I just think we have to explain it to them. Say, this is really annoying. I've got to concentrate on this for 45 minutes.
And explain the reason why that's important. Because that is the world that they're going to enter. Yeah. And I think that's the moderation and nuance about this debate, if it is a debate even now, is that the children obviously are going to go into a world where they're going to need to be taught how to manage themselves and how to utilise digital technology. But that's different from their experience of technology as a child at different ages. And it's about that age appropriateness. And one of the main components of that is digital wisdom, which includes the curriculum content of how to utilise it, but also everything they need to know about how to self-regulate, how to self-discipline, how to engage with people in a human way. So I think it's about making sure we're being thoughtful about these things.
Well, I think you've just delineated the difference between technology education is essential, but EdTech is a very different beast. And while we want our children to be digitally literate, of course, that can be taught in IT lessons. It doesn't mean they have to be on Spark's Reader for English. It's a completely different world, and parents are realising that. Of course, we need our children to be able to recognise fake information from real information, all the wonderful things like, sound and animation and robotics and some coding, though I think that's going to be obsolete soon. The sort of usefulness of tech is something no parent would want to deny their children. It's just when it tips over into dependency and laziness and kind of atrophy that there's a problem. And I also, what you said about when COVID happened, it was a necessity. And I completely understand why teachers went, oh, God, this stuff has been a lifesaver. This is wonderful. And then things didn't really go back to books swiftly enough or efficiently enough, because it was very, very useful. But also, thousands of parents around the world realised that their children weren't learning well this way. They were not engaged. They were getting depressed. They were getting anxious. They were getting headaches looking at the screens all day. They were getting glasses when it didn't even run in the family. All these strange counter effects of learning online, people started realising. And parents aren't drinking that this is the future Kool-Aid anymore. They're saying, no, it's not, because the huge tech bros aren't sending their children to schools like this.
I think that's a hugely interesting point, isn't it? I've seen you reference EdTech as big tech in a school uniform, which is a quite an interesting way of putting it. But I think you just hit the nail on the head. When we're talking about the people who are designing these products, they're not letting their own children near them.
Exactly.
I think that kind of is something for all of us to reflect on.
Well, if Bill Gates is saying devices have a lousy record in the classroom, and Steve Jobs was very open about not letting his own kids go near an iPad, we've all got to go, okay, these are the guys making these things and we're just lapping them up.
Just taking one step back a moment, how did you first get interested into this world of what a screen's doing to children? How did that trigger? I saw, in your role as a school home support patron, there was a wonderful quote you came out with from your early visits to schools where you said, we're seeing distracted classrooms and silent playgrounds. And I thought, wow, that captures this really nicely. Was that the kind of lightning bulb moment where you thought, I need to spend more time sorting this out?
It was exactly that. I visited so many schools where I saw poor teachers desperately trying to get their pupils' attention. And it's a completely impossible battle to win if kids have smartphones in the classrooms. It's impossible, which is why banning them from the school day is such a no-brainer. I'm just baffled as to why that hasn't been done. And if they're allowed them in the school day, of course they go on them in break, because human beings actually can't compete with these things. They give a child everything they need without any kind of struggle or effort or possible humiliation, possible rejection, all the things that make you into a person with fibre. You don't have to do if you're just online. So the teachers couldn't compete and the friends couldn't compete. Your friends can't compete if they're going to say something that slightly distresses you out or no one laughs at your joke. It's much easier to, just hibernate in your screen. So I thought teachers need to be helped here by these wretched things being made sort of illegal from the school day. But then I saw schools who were being very strict about phones, and then the kids were on iPads all day. And often they weren't working. They were sort of shopping or messaging each other or watching YouTube, really. And the poor IT departments had to work overtime trying to make sure, oh my God, Johnny in 4Bs, just go and get him again, and just endless amounts of work. Why? Why, when you could just go back to calm books? I don't understand it. And that's, again, my point about tech ed, not ed tech. That's my main point.
And ensuring that it's used specifically
Yes,
to accelerate
exactly.
the learning, not as a way to engage with content, for example.
Specifically and moderately. And there are apps I absolutely love. There's a geography app called Cetera, which has no frills, no dopamine ignition, no exciting rewards of cakes exploding into balloons, no music. It's just you have to click on where various rivers, mountains, countries, capital cities, American states. It's utterly brilliant. And that's an example of really great tech. I haven't seen enough evidence of school tech that's as no frills and non-distracting and really useful as that.
What worries me about that is this irony that we're more connected than ever. Our children are more connected than ever, but they are so alienated and disconnected more than ever. And that's shown in all the mental health statistics and the suicide rates and self-harming rates and all of that, which is just heartbreaking as a grown-up and an educator. How can we help them? And one thing I experienced for the first time, because I am cautious about all of this as an educator, I'll put my cards on the table, was AI companion thing, which is now embedded. And someone mentioned this about how a teacher can become an AI character. I probably had about 40 seconds of interaction, and I just thought to myself, this is utterly terrifying.
Yeah.
Because this AI, I won't use the word person, thing, knew me. And it was just so terrifying. And I thought to myself, my goodness, how are we going to ensure when our children engage with AI that it's for good access to knowledge, for example, as opposed to the vehicle of AI becoming the connection or the intimacy?
Exactly. And that is happening everywhere.
And the relationship
and the AI
education.
companions can be very sycophantic and really nice to you and not tell you off when you don't bother actually doing the work and just say, you're great, live your own life, be true to yourself. It's so spooky. I also think AI, it's such a massive, great subject. But when it's used as a sort of personal PA to just get you all the key facts about a subject and then put it in a great structure and a great order, if children don't have those building blocks of doing all that slightly boring, effortful stuff, you don't get them back. I don't think children should be utilising AI, encouraged to utilise it in an educational sphere before they know how to do that without it. before they know how to look up a load of stuff, structure an essay, do a rough draft. It's all quite hard work.
Yeah.
And I think hard work is part of where the learning happens. It's that mountain climbing and you get to the top and you see the subject you've just been learning and it sits in you forever. That doesn't happen if you just click your fingers and everything's given to you. It really won't stay with you for more than 5 minutes.
I couldn't agree more. I linked to that and putting my doctor's cap on. We talk about the developing brain and neuroplasticity and put in simple terms, right, how our brain can change and remodel as it learns new skills. And I think from 0 to 7, we know it's at its peak ability to sort of remodel and absorb material. And I think the best example we can all think of is if you want to teach a child a language, do it in that window. God, I wish I had.
Me
anyway,
too.
And then obviously like 7 to 25, it starts to get a little bit lower. And then from 25 onwards, we can still remodel. But as we know, trying to learn a language like I am, very difficult. The challenge that we've got, as I see it with young people now, is we're putting them increasingly in front of technology, increasingly in front of screens, where their brains are being genuinely rewired to have those dopamine hits, their concentration's being reduced. What are some of the other scientific points that you're now seeing from the work that you're doing that technology is actually creating in these children?
Well, I think my favourite study that I sort of quote quite a lot is just from Learning Outcomes, which was an educational researcher called John Jerrim did a test of 3,000 pupils, PISA tests, maths, science and reading. And he split them in half and 1,500 did all their work and all their tests on computers and the rest did it books and paper. And the paper-based group at the end of 6 months did 20 scaled score points better than the computer-based group, which equated to 6 months of additional learning.
Wow.
And he just said, this is all the evidence that educators need. They are learning so much more profoundly. It's like sort of slow food. It's like these slow movements we're realizing are so much better than fast movements. And I have compassion for teachers who thought that it was all shiny and futuristic, and they did it with the best intentions, downloading this software into their schools and training their teachers in how to use it. It was in the best interests of the children at that time. It was sold to them as the future and how to make children prepared for a digital world. And now we've got evidence that it's not working all over the world. And Sweden have been very brave saying, yikes, we have spent billions on this stuff. Our children aren't working well. We're going to get rid of it. It's so brave and interesting. So they've reinvested in books, pen and paper and are seeing results shoot up to the sky immediately. So I have compassion. It was meant well. But now we've got so much evidence that it's not healthy way to learn. It's not a deep way to learn. And just in terms of parents writing to me saying, I don't know how he's learning, but he's getting such bad headaches and he's going to bed later and he's grumpier. So just the agitating effect of looking at a bright screen is physically unhealthy. And we now know that it's cognitively inferior to books, pen and paper. For one size fits all, I'm very far from convinced.
So I'm trying to keep my own clarity about technology and digital in education space. So, for example, the company that you founded is an online company which enables children to aspire to being in medicine and law, for example. That's outside of the classroom. Coaching, helpful. Then there's, of course, digital curriculum. So the content they need to know. That's, I think, pretty clearly ring-fenced. Then there's digital as pedagogy, which is where the question marks are, using digital access or platforms to learn other subjects. And then there's this other area, which is, why do you think the UK government hasn't got involved in this in their decision-making, like some of the other countries around the world?
Well, I think they've got very involved and they're getting terribly excited about AI and EdTech. and I think they're bringing in all sorts of changes that people like me are trying to find out what on earth is happening. But a lot of teachers I'm very close to are very worried about it. And I think they're making the same mistake that a few heads made about 6-7 years ago, going, this is in the best interest of our children. And now many of them are reversing. And I think our government are still 7 years behind, thinking AI is really exciting, not realising that relegating human teachers is a travesty, actually. I'd like the thought of learning being very concentrated and interesting and effective, and then lots of time to play and explore and create. That's brilliant.
Because teaching is magic.
Yes.
I say this a lot. Teaching is a craft and a magic. And I'm sure all three of us remember, I mean, the reason why we do this podcast, How to Lead an Extraordinary Life, the number of people who've mentioned their teachers
Totally.
as unlocking
Totally.
their own inner magic. And that connection with the human being, you know, I've had teachers who changed my life, as I'm sure you both have. It's about the child a lot wanting to make that human proud of them and their achievements, and that adult giving that child the confidence to explore areas that haven't been explored.
Totally agree
and
with
that
you.
is so
Precious.
important and precious, the
And
magic of teaching.
You can't replicate that with a robot marking your work. Why would you care what a stupid robot thought? I remember my English teacher's handwriting at the end of my essay. I remember exactly what her handwriting was like and what mark I was going to get from this teacher I worshipped. And she's the reason for everything, you know, good in my life, apart from my wonderful parents. She's the most important person in my life. I still see her sort of, you know, 30 years on. And I think children who aren't as lucky in their home life, the teacher can be their salvation and the person to make them think, maybe life's okay and this person believes in me and I'm going to work hard for this person. If you're just relegated to a screen, what hope do children have who need that mentor?
And I think picking up on that point, I'm a big fan of understanding everything about human well-being. And the number one factor that has now been clinically proven to create happiness in human beings, with the world's biggest longitudinal study on this, is the quality of your connections. And to me, that one piece of research has to become central to what
education.
we're talking about, because as we've said, we've got a more connected world through this, but ironically enough, a more disconnected world as a result. And we know that the correlation to human happiness is exactly connecting with human beings. And we're moving the dial away from that. And that's why I champion a lot of the work that you're trying to do, because it's so, so important. But I also think the messaging that's coming out from so many big respected bodies is now they have a responsibility as to how they're positioning this stuff. And I look at the World Economic Forum, for example, right? A huge thought leader, very respected body. And they've very clearly articulated the 4 key skills that they look at in the next generation that will equip you to be successful. One of them is digital literacy, unsurprisingly. The other one, another big one, is your soft skills, your emotional intelligence, your resilience, your bounceability quotient, as we like to call it, along with lifelong learning, curiosity, and cross-cultural competency. Now, you look at one of them being digital literacy. The other ones really are almost opposed, ironically enough. So how do we find a balance? And I think this is the question I ask myself. 2 young people, my children growing up, how do I find this balance where I can say, I'm not going to cut the screens to the point that then they're going to become digitally illiterate, and I'm going to put all my eggs into this other basket? There needs to be a happy medium. And I always think scientifically, that Venn diagram, where's that sweet spot? And at what point do we need to start introducing the digital literacy? And from listening to what you're saying, is your opinion we build that framework up of the soft skills and earlier, then layer on the digital literacy? How do you see that on a timeline as a student progresses?
I think because younger children are susceptible to sort of eyesight damage and, you know, their spines are forming and, you know, when they get 9, 10, 11, their hormones are sort of starting to, I mean, screen time can affect hormones, you'll know as a doctor. I don't see why primary children need to be taught much. I mean, of course, computers sort of twice a week, that's fine. I really do think it's possible to be a digitally literate person when you emerge from school at 18 without having had all your subjects be online. I just think it's so different. Technology education is essential. And that's what I say. I just think EdTech is something that needs to have a very harsh torch shone on it. It's a huge business run by private equity. A few non-educators are making a hell of a lot of money out of these apps that promise the earth, and we're seeing they don't deliver. And the skills you're talking about, which the WEF consider very important. And you're right, they're diametrically opposed to a screen-filled classroom. You don't get all those, you know, soft skills. You're not good with people. You don't understand how to do conflict in a room. You don't understand that stuff unless you've been in a classroom with people constantly engaged. But I think we just have to cherish learning that we know works with human beings, with books, with handwriting. We know it works. I just think the money has to be spent on more teacher support, whether it's more human beings in the classroom, smaller classes. So much money is being spent on EdTech and it hasn't been proven. And, people like me are very skeptical about it.
Investing in our teachers.
Big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on a personal level, I get so many emails from teachers all around the world since that talk saying, you hit on something that's happened to me in my profession. I went into teaching to light the candle in all these children, and I can't do it anymore because I'm just wandering around the classroom saying, don't look up that, don't stay on task. That is not why I went into teaching. It's so demeaning and insulting. It's one of the most noble professions you can go into. It's properly life-changing, as you say, especially for children who don't have particularly nice homes. Their teacher is their God. It's so sacred. And we're relegating it for this stuff that doesn't work. What are we doing?
You mentioned earlier the power of boredom.
Yes.
I mean, I remember exactly what you mean in my childhood, being so terribly bored with my two sisters. And so we would just write poems, nonsense poems, or write plays and things. And yet I'm aware as a mother myself now, because of the demands on me, the desire to entertain them is a really strong one. And imagination obviously has played such a huge role in your life, in your career. Where do you think imagination sits in education, in teaching?
I think reading. I think much more reading has to be infused into the curriculum. Proper books when they're little, really good literature. Set the bar up here and they all reach it.
Yeah.
I think standards, especially, I've got to be very careful, but in various schools I know, they're just too low. It's underestimating the children. And I think if you can give primary school children the tools to be able to tackle quite a we've got the best literature in the whole world, England. And we often don't mine it because we go for quite modern stuff that seems much more exciting and superficially engaging. And it's letting children down, I think. So I think way more reading and creative writing. And I think I think it's difficult to say, read to a child, because how do you do that? How do you monitor it in the evening? I understand that's difficult. But I mean, just giving a child a book every 3 weeks that they have to write a book review on, not making it incontestable. You have to have written a proper synopsis of this book in 3 weeks. A book for half term, 2 books for Christmas holiday. It's not that big. It's just different to what's being done at the moment. It's like we're pandering to children's attention sort of deterioration by making the work more and more silly and cartoon-like, and I don't approve of that.
What you've just described there is exactly what's happened at the school that my 2 kids go to, and wow, have I seen a change. So, for example, the start of this term, they brought in something called a Reading Scholars Programme. They have to read the book, they have to then get an exit ticket, which means they have to be able to describe it to their teacher in the class, and wow, all of a sudden, there's a passion for reading developing, and you're looking at this and thinking, that's a simple change that's had huge, downstream effects for these individuals. So I'm fully on board with that. And I know you're a fan of Jonathan Haidt's, Anxious Generation. I think every parent talks about this book now. I've read it. It's a great book. I think the key takeaway for me is that sort of phone play childhood versus the play sort of childhood. Play-based childhood. And like we were just discussing there, we can all look back on our own childhoods and remember, for me, it was kicking a football against a wall like 100 hours a day.
It's really good for you.
It's really good for you. So we've talked about some of the scientific biological impacts of screens impacting sleep, hormones, increased links with obesity, mental health rates flying through the roof. Eyesight, another one. Those who are pro-tech look at all of that list and say, correlation or causation? There are a multitude of factors that could also be contributing to higher obesity rates, higher mental health, statistics that we're seeing. And those that are pro-tech are simply maybe saying, you're jumping on that bandwagon and using that data set and saying it's all screens. What's your response to that?
I think correlation is enough of a reason to press pause and really investigate it and really prove the effectiveness of these platforms compared to traditional learning methods. I think correlation when it comes to children is huge. it's the step before causation. And a lot of people have said this to Jonathan Haidt. Come on, there's a lot of correlation, sure, between kids getting smartphones and all this self-harm, suicide, anxiety, depression going up. But really? And he's saying, yes, these graphs, look at the mirror symmetry. And I think the graphs are very similar with learning outcomes. This is the first time that our IQs have gone down
in the PISA scores.
Human recorded history. Yeah. We're getting thicker. And I think part of it, a big part of it, is quick, superficial screen learning.
And I come back to that quote that we were saying off air earlier that I just found so interesting and I want to delve into, that you said, which is, it's more helpful to stare at a blank wall than it is to stare at a screen. And I just want to dig into that. It's quite a controversial statement.
I think it's because you're so passive when you're faced with a lovely iPad full of lovely YouTube videos, YouTube shorts, everything's so entertaining. It's like, it's much more serious than junk food, because you feel sick after a while after junk food. You don't feel sick after hundreds of videos. And this is another important distinction. It's not only children seeing harmful material, which obviously has to be stamped out immediately, it's non-harmful material as well. It's just funny stuff that's a complete waste of life, that's completely addictive. It's lovely for a child to just sit in bed and watch silly videos all day. And that's why I'm passionate about it being a government-led thing, because I visit schools where children aren't in the position of being in homes where the parents can start WhatsApp groups and say, let's not give our child screens, and be all galvanised and middle class about it. I see sort of children whose mum works 3 jobs, dad don't know where he is, just being destroyed by looking at stuff all night and coming into school, falling asleep, eating terrible food to try and stay awake. They're getting obese. It spans everything. And if they're lonely, there's big old community WhatsApp groups where they can get sucked into really problematic groups. I think all sorts of, terrorism and radicalization. This is getting a bit darker, but I think the knock-on effects of letting a child loose on the internet are actually too multiple to count.
So just taking the conversation on then in terms of the practicalities of how we try and turn this into a positive and a good outcome, right? At a kind of very baseline level, as a parent, it's very, very hard to police this stuff, as we've said. Okay, for example, you may say, our household for my kids is going to be at least smartphone free. They suddenly go around to a play date.
Of course.
They come back and they're telling you stuff that you're like, where have you got this from? Oh, my friend's got a smartphone. And all of a sudden, it's very, very difficult to regulate. So as parents, how can we take the first steps? Because it's always baby steps initially. I appreciate there's a government change, view. There's a parental view that needs to kind of join up. But there are so many different variables involved in that mesh. How do you, with your own children, try and police this?
I'm totally failing. I really am. I think
that makes 2 of us, maybe 3 of us, Libby. Yeah.
I mean, they were both given iPads in a primary school I took them out of a couple of years ago without any parental consultation or anything. They came home with these things so excited.
And you took them out as a result?
No. Oh, I took them out of the school, but they had another year to go where they sort of learned on these things, did their homework on them, played the games after, asked for rewards after, wanted to watch funny videos after. I mean, it was a complete nightmare. And I've kind of failed because they love them, partly because it annoys me so much and they know that this is my thing. And so just vanishing into their room, and I know they're not reading. I know they're doing something on a wretched iPad. It's sort of become a quite amusing bone of contention. But I don't, it's a really good question, and I don't have a pat answer, because once a child goes down that route of being instantly entertained, it's so hard to bring them back to, let's have a walk in the park. I said that this weekend. Both girls just laughed at me. I'm like, what are you talking about? That sounds awful. A family board game where there's a bit of tension and someone's cheated and someone's won. She didn't deserve to win. That's real. I mean, it sounds
politics.
It's politics. It sounds so vanilla, but it's real life stuff that if they're spending too much time on screen, it's hard work and it's stressful and it's not as easy as being in your bed with your iPad.
But I tell you, interestingly, one of the things that we've found that's brought our family together is sometimes like some TV shows that we all like. For example,
Totally
The
agree.
Traitors, right? One that you'll know very
Yes.
well from Claudia, obviously hosting it. But I look at that and then I come back to the same point. It's another moment with a screen.
I know. But now
And
TV is
so-
considered deeply wholesome.
Yes, exactly.
Compared to kids being alone
Because you're
in
sharing
their
an
bedrooms.
experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's
and you
why.
do
what's
learn
the
through those
distinction?
stories. That's the I think there is a difference, because experiencing something together that you can then reflect on and share is different to these quick dopamine
I agree.
Yeah.
video
Which are
clips,
isolated
which
as
are
well.
on your own.
Yeah.
And I think to respond to your question, Ricky, about what we can do, I think there is another element to this, which is, again, about the age of the children. So my eldest is 17, nearly 18, and my youngest has just turned 5. And I will be a different parent to those two because of what I'm learning as I get older. But my 17-year-old, she had access to a phone probably around 12. Then we went through the awful years of not being able to get it away from her. Now, she and her friends very successfully self-discipline
Wow.
and govern each other. So that generation of those young people have learned themselves. So they will often go to supper or each other's houses and they'll all put their phones in the middle.
That's amazing
Oh
to
my
hear.
God. I think
That's-
that's
that's-
slightly
that's
outliers,
amazing.
aren't they?
And
That's
actually,
themselves.
on
It's
that
really
point,
fascinating.
It is so fascinating to see that actually these neuroplastic brains, whilst they're getting rewired, some of them are actually starting to have that self-awareness at the same point of like, this is really not good for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's that. Do you remember that Times interview of all those teenagers about 18 months ago? It interviewed about 20 16 to 18-year-olds from all around the country. And it said to them all, if this stuff, all this social media, all the stuff you're addicted to and say you love could have been non-existent, none of you would have done it from the age of, childhood to now. Would you miss it? And all of them said, no, we wish that we'd been kept off it. We wish it didn't exist. It's destroyed our ability to concentrate. It's made a lot of us very anxious, very depressed, envious of stupid people online who were probably idiots. It's ruined our childhoods. And it was completely unanimous. All different demographics saying, what are grown-ups doing? What, that's their job, to say no to stuff. And they've just gone, all right then, because there was no delineation when the online boom started between children and adults.
Yeah, it's true.
I
I
really
think we
wa-
can have faith in them. I think that
Yeah.
we've talked about this as kind of our generation, the parents making decisions for children, and at an appropriate time, that is, of course, correct. But the children themselves are learning. The generations are different in their access and self-regulation about this. So I think we can have faith that they will come through.
But I think your daughter and her friends sound like slight outliers. That's incredible. And I think the majority of teens go, I know it's not good for me, but I'm sodding well addicted. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't help. Sorry to say a bad word. I'm in this treacle and I can't get out.
Well, 25% of 5 to 7-year-olds in this country have a smartphone. I couldn't believe that. 1 in 4.
1 in 4 of
5 to
under
7-year-olds.
sevens.
And then the threshold, the minute you go to secondary school, 97% of them.
That's the real
and,
change.
And
yeah.
that feels the threshold where it
Yeah.
suddenly becomes societally okay to say my son or daughter has a smartphone. I'm looking at it, approaching that with my own children, thinking I'm just not going to give them one.
Yeah.
But then what's the knock-on effects for them socially, like we were discussing earlier? Are they going to feel an outcast? Are they going to miss out on stuff? It's such a difficult topic, which
It's
is
a
why
nightmare.
I think it's so important, the fact that you're giving it such a voice. But I still feel there's so much work to be done. And just picking up on the point you just said, trusting our young people who are now, as you said in that time survey, coming out the other end of the funnel and saying, do you know what? I look back on this, get rid of it. We need to give those people a voice because they will resonate with the child who's maybe 2-3 years younger than them.
And it's why voices like Freya India are so powerful. This wonderful 25-year-old saying, I have there's a Greek word for it, I can't remember what it is. It's nostalgia for something I never had. And she said, I'm nostalgic for concerts where people just got lost in the music rather than filming it. Being in one of my friends' rooms and we're all just laughing our heads off. We're not just recording everything and taking loads of pictures. A sort of romantic moment with a boy in a street without having looked him up on Instagram before and seen that he was at something last night and he was with that girl and this is really stressful. All the sort of, and, even tiny things like a WhatsApp message, which doesn't get lots of laughing faces. You think, I was meant to be funny and she didn't laugh and she used a little, very small things can sort of eddy into these huge tsunamis in a young brain. And I think the young voices of, there's Lewis Swire, there's Freya, there's a lot of really powerful young voices saying, guys.
They are coming through.
They are coming through and they're very powerful. I totally agree.
Sophie, this podcast is about how to live an extraordinary life, and you touched upon it earlier. But to ask you the question, is there someone that you would single out as having a huge influence or being a personal inspiration for you and what you've achieved in your incredible life?
Well, aside from my magnificent parents, who really couldn't have been more supportive and without being remotely pushy, I don't know how they did it. I loved them so much. I just wanted to please them without them ever pushing me in any direction at all. They're my very best friends. My English teacher she was a very tiny little Irish woman. She didn't have an Irish accent, but she was Irish, Mrs. Cohen. And she would sit on the edge of the desk when, from 11 to 18, and she would just read us a little bit of A Passage to India or, a Graham Greene or whatever it was. She chose such wonderful books. And the whole world stopped. And I just looked at this woman with this passion. And then she'd set us something very creative and exciting to do based on what we'd just heard. And she would, when talking about setting the bar, she would set us really hardcore books to read from the age of 11. And we all just got completely used to it. And I think we all, from anyone who was taught by her, has such a love of literature and has learned so much from all the books they read and knows what she won't mind me saying this, she was such a petite little thing, this little spring onion of a woman, and she just opened cavernous worlds for me.
Wow.
And I didn't have a great time at school. I had a bad time with a group of girls, and if it hadn't been for her, I'd have checked out. I wouldn't have bothered. This is why I'm so scared about children going online for their learning. If something social happens with their friends or something bad's going on at home and there's not a human being to notice it and scaffold them, that's a disastrous way for education to go. So I would say my beloved teacher and also my Latin teacher, Mr. Thermostocleus, who's still at City, I think 30 years later.
Wow.
They were both just mountains in my life.
And what a legacy for them to hear those words from you today. Amazing, amazing.
So what does the future hold, Sophie, as you move forward, right? This is a huge topic you're grappling with. How are you going to continue to tackle it over the coming kind of years?
Well, I need people like you who are so brave because, you educate people and you both have huge amounts of children under your, what's the word? Auspices. That's the wrong word. But your care. Thank you. And, I think some of your schools did get excited about this stuff and you've gone, gosh, I'm not sure about this. Let's look at it. That's real courage. It's real leadership. It's real courage. It's very inspiring. And I need people like you to gather behind me to say to the government, please can we not relegate humanity from the learning sphere? This is so dangerous. So I want to, in an ideal world, I would actually build a website for parents worried about digital education. That's more my interest than smartphones now because I think that conversation is being had wonderfully by all sorts of pockets of people around the country. I don't know how informed people are about their children being on screen all day, apart from the many emails and letters I receive going, I know this isn't right, but I don't know how to talk to my school. So I want schools to be responsive to parents who might not have the language. It's very complicated stuff. I want schools to open their doors to parents saying, is there any way my child can use a book instead of this because it's not suiting him or her? I want to show that there's a sort of value to quite hard work and concentration and getting through an essay all by yourself without using ChatGPT. I want children to be self-protective like your daughter is. And the sanctity of the classroom. I think that's what I want your listeners to come away with. I was lucky enough to have a nice home, but the fact that my teachers provided such inspiration and solace and love to me, and love is the word, they're 80% of the reason I've went to a wonderful university. I did lots of thrilling acting jobs, writing jobs. I feel empowered to speak about this topic because of my wonderful education. And education is the open door to, a limitless world. So I want to respect humanity in the school place, basically.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Sophie. It's been a fascinating and wide-ranging conversation. And as a parent and educator, I'm so grateful for your work in this space. So thank you so much.
Thank you both for having me. It's been fabulous.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of How to Live an Extraordinary Life from Duke's Education.
On the next episode...
Thrown out of school at the age of 12, 13, and sheepishly, when the head calls the father and you sit in the back of a car, even though you could sit in the front, nothing's said on the drive home. Just one of those pin drop silent moments. You know what dad's thinking, and you know what is going to happen when you get home. And but I was very lucky. His approach to it was, right, we're going to send you to an independent school. He was going to richly bet the farm and everything he had on using the little bit of savings and all the earnings he had to send me to independent education initially, and then a few years later, when he could afford it, my sister.
If this episode has left you feeling empowered or wanting to know more, please do leave us a review and let us know what you thought. It helps others find the podcast and learn from the extraordinary lives we showcase.
And if you have an idea for a future topic, we would love to hear from you. You can WhatsApp us on 0203 951 3551. Please do also share and follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you want to hear more about what we do at Duke's Education, you can go to dukeseducation.com.
How to Live an Extraordinary Life is a platform media production. The producer is Adrian Bradley and the executive producers are Jonathan Pascoe and Nick Minter.
Keep living your own extraordinary life, and we'll see you next time.